Whoa! Today, Corey and I are going to look into more PETG stuff. You guys left comments, and we have a lot to learn. It's okay, I got you, buddy. So today, I figure Corey and I are going to go through some of your comments. Last week, we released a video about PETG, and this week, I think we need to already go back and learn a little bit more. That's right. Believe it or not, we don't know everything. We are on YouTube, but we don't know everything. So what we're going to do today is learn about some stuff, even though that's what we did in the last video. Your guys' comments on that video have helped me identify a couple of different areas that I'd like to dig a little deeper into. So let's start with our first section, overhangs. Let's see what you guys are saying here. First things first, Not So Dirt, always in our comment section. He's always there. You know what I'm talking about. Good stuff, buddy. Glad to see it. Moving on. Omega Gaming Network. My guy. I love PETG. I also hate PETG. He's got a lot of Bambu printers. PETG is good for a lot of things, but it has some weaknesses, and if you're not aware of them, then they can trip you up. Like I said in the last video, I don't know everything about PETG. I've only printed a handful of spools of it, probably. Mostly done PLA. Omega Gaming Network is saying overhangs are a big problem with PETG. So maybe we try doing a little bit of overhang printing and see if we can duplicate that. Usually people have temperature towers that test overhangs as well as a couple of other things, but specifically for the overhangs, I wanted a model that only focused on that. So I went on to printables and downloaded the common one. It works pretty well. These models aren't typically meant to be printed to completion. Often they fail before they get to the very top. Sometimes if you're lucky or you have just the right settings, you can make it through, but by and large, this is meant to be a stress test. Okay, first things first, let's look at some overhangs. So I was actually kind of surprised PETG did a lot better on overhangs than I was expecting. The clear one did exceptionally well. Overhangs typically get worse if you're printing hotter because the material stays molten, so it kind of gets saggy and droopy. This one, in black, was printed at a lower temperature, did much worse. This one, printed in clear at a higher temperature, did much better. They both about made it to the same height and then failed. This test is kind of made to be a torture test. It's not made to be a model that's printed. With that in mind, the clear PETG one turned out so much better. Corey was really impressed with these results, so we're just going to put those ones there. Overall conclusions with that. The black, which is a standard PETG, did have pretty horrible overhangs and a lot of strings hanging out on the bottom, and I think that's more indicative of what you'll see with a regular PETG. The clear one is just kind of an outlier, I feel like. It just turned out really well, but regardless, both of them made it to the same height before they failed. Overhangs are probably a struggle for PETG. So that was a bit of good information on overhangs, but what about heat resistance? I mean, we're printing all these models at different temperatures, so surely the higher temperature has better heat resistance, right? I guess we'll find out. Carl Barks. Nice. He says, I love PETG. It holds up better to the AZ summers. That's Arizona, and it is hot there. 95% of what I print is something functional, so it's helpful with that. I can imagine PLA would not stand up to an Arizona summer at all. And you get the added benefit of lower humidity, so your PETG doesn't get waterlogged quite as easily. That's pretty good. Alright, what else we got? Steel Shooter. PETG is one of my favorite materials as it has a much better heat resistance than PLA. If you print it at decent temperature, the layer bonding is very strong. That's something that I've noticed as well. PETG does have excellent layer adhesion in between each individual layer. Sometimes with PLA you see layers split or shift, or it looks like they're not bonded as well. I don't know if it's actually the case with PETG, but when you look at a PETG part, it seems like the layers are just generally stacked better, generally fused better. When you print things hotter, that makes sense that stuff will fuse a lot better because it's molten, you know, for longer. I suppose that has something to do with it. I suspect at the lower temperatures, the layer stacking is going to be a lot more coarse and won't look quite as well fused, but that's just a prediction. We'll do some testing and see. ALKS MDLAKS, Alxmedalax, brings up the fact that it's only slightly harder to print than PLA. That's what Corey was just telling me a second ago. It prints pretty easy, especially nowadays. And then he goes on to talk about how much he doesn't like PLA, how it's terrible in the summer heat and that sort of thing. I have actually experienced that in boxing up Etsy orders. Some of the pieces that I used to sell had some thin walls. It would arrive at a customer having warped and just already gone crazy because of the heat just in transit. So PLA, yep, I can confirm that is the case. PETG is great for anything that needs to be structurally sound and cheap. I basically use nylon whenever I can, and if I need to print cheap stuff, I go with PETG. Yeah, that is one thing. Nylons are really expensive. They're way better. I wouldn't even put them in the same conversation with PETG. Their mechanical properties are way better. A lot harder to print, but you get a lot more of a solid part if your application demands that. For sure, nylon, that's the way. If I need to print cheap stuff, I go with PETG. Yeah, so that kind of makes sense, because PETG is pretty well entry level anymore. Yeah, so I said I had similar experiences with PLA on those hot summer days, and I was like, you know, responding, like trying to vibe with my buddy here. I hadn't realized that he already commented before that, saying that he hates our video. But I don't know what that has to do with PETG, so we're just gonna roll past it. Once we're done here tonight, I'm gonna pick a couple of these testers to put out in my car for a few days, and we'll see how they do in the sun. I'm gonna put a PLA one in the car for the control to kind of show how PLA responds to being in those high heat environments, and then I'll probably pick one or two of the PETG ones to put out there as well, just to see how they do. Alright, so I went ahead and put these out in the car. We've had a couple of days where it's been at 100 degrees with the index, thereabout. Pretty hot. Hot enough that PLA should be having some issues. These ones, with the model being as thick and chunky as it is and not having as many thin features, did not change at all. They sat in the car on a black dashboard in the hot sun, no change anywhere on the models at all. But PLA sucks in the sun. This is just a bad example, believe me. With that out of the way, we need to talk about something that's very near and dear to me. As you know, I had an accident with a print bed recently, and well, this is something that just hits close to home. Alright, Ronnie Spaneveld says 240 bed, 80 fan, 40%, 2x4010 used glue stick. I don't know what 2x4010 used glue stick to make it more awesome. I have an Ender 7. I don't know what that is. I don't know what any of these things are. But the one thing I did want to note here, using a glass print bed, I'll actually show some cut footage from another one of the videos where I talked to Corey about how I used to be on glass print beds, and I could not deal with the spring steel PEI beds. What a pain. The bamboos, though, don't even matter. And I was really resistant to the spring steel PEI beds. I was like, man, because I tried printing on some of them, had a couple of printers that came with them, and when I would set my Z offset, I would always accidentally dig the nozzle into it and ruin the bed. And I'm like, you know what? I do this to a glass one. It's okay, because it doesn't, and I will do it again. So I was like, I don't want that garbage. So I just stuck with the glass beds. You know what? I'm a believer now in the spring steel PEI beds, and glass beds suck, even though they really do hang on a lot better. I'll still never go back. Fair enough. I don't care. I'm not interested in it anymore. This is way better. I'm like, why? So I don't know if that's a hot take or what the case is, but I used to like glass print beds. Now I only like the spring steel print beds, which is also what everybody likes. Just take that for what it is. Another thing you guys brought up a lot is printing temperature. I print at a lot higher temperature than most of you, so maybe let's mess with that a little bit. I print Creality Black PETG at 230. See, yeah, 230 seems kind of low to me as well, but again, I don't know enough about PETG, so I guess I'm out here learning too. Timothy Hackett, 7372, 275, question mark, bruh, I print beautifully at 225. We must have different flavors of PETG. Yeah, this is something I actually really wanted to look into, so I think I'm gonna print temperature towers and some different models at different temperatures just to see what kind of results we get. When we were doing the research for this video, Corey could tell you better, but the internet said 220 is perfectly acceptable for PETG. I've never printed PETG that cold, but again, I haven't printed that much PETG, so that very well could be the case. We'll do some testing. This is the past me, and that will be the future me. Let's do that. So if you're not familiar with a temperature tower, it's usually a model that someone designs to find out as much information about a material as they can. The way it works is every step on this tower is printed at a different temperature. So you can pick your variable, you have it change for each step on your model, and then you can do your direct comparison to see what changes happen as a result of that variable. This guy was ambitious and really tall, and I printed it on one of the minis, which is a bed slinger, similar to Corey here. Corey's got a loose belt. There we go. When you have a bed slinger, your model is being thrown around, and so while this is printing, it's wobbling back and forth because the action of the nozzle is actually putting force into it. As it gets taller and taller, the action that nozzle has, the leverage on the workpiece, becomes greater because it's further away from where it's anchored. This temperature tower made it a lot further than I thought it would, but you know, we're doing science, so I wanted to try it out. As far as results of the temperature tower, again, pretty surprised. So this clear PETG just prints well, I'm convinced. It doesn't seem to string very much, doesn't really have trouble with overhangs. The only problem it does have is it needs to be printed really hot, and this temperature tower shows that pretty well. The hotter being at the bottom at 280 is much clearer, the layers appear to be bonded a lot better, whereas the top, it's a lot more opaque and less clear, which tells me that it's not getting warm enough for it to bond, it's not getting warm enough for it to really do what it's meant to do when it's coming out of that nozzle. I'm concluding that super hot temperature is due to the clear PETG and not generally PETG as a whole. I imagine if I did this in black, it would have a lot lower temperature that it's happy at, and we would see a lot more of the stringing and trouble with overhangs. So a good way to start wrapping your head around some of these newer materials is compare it to one that you know. In the comments, I saw you guys comparing it to PLA, which is the more common one. So with regards to PLA, it's pretty similar, but there's certainly a couple of different materials you guys are referencing, so maybe we'll dig into that a little. Alfie Gordon 9013. How you guys have so few subscribers is insane. Great video. Love the conversational dynamic. Very informative. 1, 2, 3 thumbs up. Hey man, thanks. We're just out here trying to learn stuff, so that's cool. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. Furblog says, I've been trying to print ASA, ABS, MABS, bloody hate them. I love PLA, but now I'll try PETG Prushiment to see if it's worth it. Hey, try out that PETG, let me know how it goes. It's always fun to mess with new materials. If you've messed around with ABS and ASA and the styrene stuff and had any levels of success, without a doubt, you're gonna be able to print PETG. It's not nearly as fussy as those. Spoiler, we'll have a video coming up on ASA in the next handful of videos. That is on the docket, so let me know in the comments what brands of ASA you guys are using, ASA, ABS, any of that stuff. As well, let me know what your print specs are when you're doing ASA or ABS, because I'll be interested to see what you guys are using before we do the video and before we do all of our research and our testing. Let me know in the comments what you guys are using for ASA, ABS. You know, the best part about doing a video like this based on your feedback and comments is you come up with things that really I've never thought about experimenting with, and it gives me an opportunity to do that. So we're gonna move into another one of those. Okay, Mercaluca. I go with PETG to 240 to 245, bed around 75. First 3 layers, no fan on. That was one thing I noticed. A couple of people mentioned the cooling fan thing. Again, I haven't messed with PETG very much, and I haven't gone outside of standard presets for a lot of these things, but the cooling fan tends to be something that's coming up a lot, so I would like to mess around with that a little bit more. Having your first couple of layers adhere exceptionally well is very important. Leaving the cooling fan off for those first couple of layers can help with that bed adhesion. Plastic remains slightly more molten. With PETG, I imagine with PLA as well, it's often off or at a lower speed for those first couple of layers to promote that better bed adhesion. So that makes sense, and I'm seeing it come up a lot. That might be something I mess with here. Oh, finally, the one I was most interested to see, really, was the fan tests, or lack of fan test, I should say. So these two were printed with no fan. Again, it's not something I've experimented with before, so I'm pretty surprised by the results. These ones printed so much better than I ever would have expected for something that wasn't being cooled at all. So it was just reliant on the ambient temperature of the room to cool the filament after it had been extruded, instead of having that constant fan blowing air on it to cool it. The only real difference between this one and the others is in the overhangs, so on the bottoms of the ears. That's kind of the only place you can really tell. You would expect with no fan, that molten material isn't going to solidify as easily or as quickly, so overhangs are definitely going to be the things that you see that. Even with that in mind, both of these printed spectacularly. So I printed the black one at 255 and the clear one at 275, and they both did stellar. Very surprised. Very surprised. These two different spools of PETG are really turning out to be quite a bit different from each other. It's good that we can get a direct comparison while still maintaining the same material, and it makes for a lot more interesting testing. Moving on, we're going to speak about another thing you guys brought up quite a bit. No mercy for the win. PETG is probably one of the best filaments to work with, especially since rapid PETG you can print it at the same speed as PLA. I'll have to double check and see what speeds I'm printing at. For a lot of the prints I've done in PETG, I've done them at the same speed as PLA. Maybe that's why I'm printing so much hotter than a lot of these people. When I was printing on my enders, and I printed a lot of black PETG, a couple of spools of black PETG. I'm pretty certain I printed at the same speeds that I was doing PLA. Bambus, I'll have to check what the Bambu presets are. PETG I've been using are just Overture Clear, that I've found I've had to print a lot hotter, and then Overture Black. So standard PETG, nothing fancy, not fast PETG, nothing like that. So when talking about printing speeds, those kind of go hand in hand with your temperature. If you're going to be printing a lot higher speeds, like the Bambu printers do, the temperature is automatically going to have to be higher. The temperature I printed at on the enders was definitely a lot lower. The speeds were going to be a lot lower too, so that kind of worked. These Bambu machines are a lot quicker, so you need to get more plastic through the hot zone quicker, and since it's going in and constantly being refreshed with cold filament, you need it to be hotter. It doesn't spend enough time in the hot zone for a 220 degree nozzle to be sufficient at those speeds. Alright, with all that being said, and with all the testing done, let's take a look. Let's see what the differences are between all of these variables on these little Nacho Chihuahua testers. With the Nacho testers, you didn't really struggle that much, like at 225. We're still printing at the regular speeds at 225, but you see how much more matte the finish is on it. The overhangs aren't too bad. Like, generally the model printed much better than I was expecting, but it looks way different than the other two. The other two are a bit glossier or really glossy, and this one's just like completely different, like not even close. The other ones you could kind of maybe tell a difference if you look at them, if you knew there was a difference. This one, far different. It basically looks like it's PLA. Oh, since we're talking about the lower temperature, when I was printing the clear PETG the first time, it was waterlogged, so I had some issues printing the Nacho, but it also requires so much higher temperature that if you print it too low, it just does not successfully print. And printing at 225 with this one was no exception. The print failed, and there was spaghetti everywhere, and it was kind of a sad day. I wasn't expecting it on that one. The temperature tower and the overhang towers, I was expecting that a little bit more. This guy, that was kind of a bummer. But that just goes to show that that filament definitely demands a lot higher printing temperatures, especially given the faster printing speeds that we're using with these machines. I guess when you think about it, it's not really that unexpected, but it was still a bummer. I don't know where to go. Oh, that was an interesting video that I was not planning on making at all. Your guys' comments are the reason why I decided to do all these tests. We had a different video scheduled for this week, but I threw it out and decided to burn through all of this really quick and try and get something together for you so I could respond. The comments were really refreshing on the last video because it really forced me to think differently about what I knew about PETG and what I thought about it. When Corey and I were doing our research, you know, the internet says this and it says that, and we did some testing and that sort of thing and drew our conclusions, but getting your feedback really allowed me to focus in on a couple of areas and pick specific variables to change and see how it changes the results, how it changes the model. Let me know in the comments what else you would like to see us do. We're going into ASA and ABS, as well as TPU coming up. What do you want to see us do when we cover those materials? Additionally, what settings do you use for ASA and TPU, and what machines are you printing those on? If you like this video and you want to see more of these kinds of videos responding to comments, let me know. If you like Corey's new look, give him a comment saying, "Looking good, Corey." Thanks for watching. Bye. I don't know.